All right. Good morning. This is Jeannie Davis, and welcome to Zoom with the principal. Ms. Gunter should be logging on any second. She just texted me that she's running down the hallway and she's on her way. So she'll be on in just a second. So our topic today is academic peer pressure. And we will touch on and talk about how, as a parent, you can help your child struggle with AP stress. Because what we mean by when we talk about academic peer pressure is this phenomenon that we definitely see at Piedmont Hills. I think it's probably true for other schools too, but it's definitely something that we tend to see at schools that have a reputation for being more high achieving, which Piedmont Hills does. And so welcome, Ms. Gunter. So what academic peer pressure is like students that take classes because their friends are taking that class and they feel like, oh, this is what I have to do to like keep up, and like this is like the expectation of the students here, so I have to take these classes. And what we see at Piedmont Hills a lot are students signing up and taking advanced placement classes because they feel like that's what they need to do. Like that's what all their friends do, or they need to get accepted into NHS, or their life is going to be over because that's what you have to do to like be like successful. So that's what we're going to be talking about today on how to combat this. And because the reason this is a problem is students aren't always necessarily picking classes or doing things that are in their best interest in terms of like social, emotional health, mental health, personal wellness. And what we've seen a lot is students putting themselves in situations where they're really stressed out, they have high anxiety, and it can be really detrimental to them. And I feel like parents a lot of times have the, like there's like this like false narrative out there that parents are the ones putting pressure on their kids to take all of these classes. And in my experience, and I know in Miss Gunter's experience, because we've talked about this, that's not necessarily true. That this pressure isn't necessarily coming from parents, it's coming from themselves because they think that that's what they need to do because that's what all their friends are doing. And that's they need to take all these classes. And when my daughter was in high school, I experienced this myself, where my daughter was like, well, I have to take AP biology. And I was like, why do you have to take AP biology? She's like, well, that's what everybody takes. Like, and I'm like, no, not everybody takes that. And you don't actually like science. And why are you going to take AP biology? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I've just seen this in my own personal, that was definitely, I wasn't putting that pressure on, but my daughter was talking to her friends and just had this idea in your head, oh, you have to take this class. Ms. Gunter, you want to chime in on?
Let me just premise this by saying I am so exhausted because of academic peer pressure this week. This has been literally like maybe the most wild week I've had in a long time. And honestly, a lot of it has to do with grades. Typically the week before the final, people think finals week is the most like stressful for the social workers. It's actually the week before finals week. I think once finals happens, they've already resigned to the fact that it is what it is. And this is the week where they're just like, cramming and, trying to get things done and things turned in. And I personally yesterday, between the hours of 8:30 and 11:45, did 4 full-blown risk assessments, which is basically like suicide screenings for students. And the academics were not the main issue, but they were definitely compounding the issue. And so this is something that is really, really a challenge at Piedmont. And I've worked at different sites, and there are different challenges, but I do kind of what Miss Davis was saying. It's like, our reputation is that our kids are high achieving, and we know that's not true for everybody. And so for the kiddos that are not, it's stressful. For the kiddos who are, it's stressful. My calendar for the rest of the week, we basically have, until Friday to see kids because we don't pull kids out during finals. And I think I have like 16 emails where kids are requesting a meeting in the next 3 days. And I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get through it, but, and that's not even our other social worker. So that I just wanted to premise with that this week is a lot. And it always is. And so I wish there were things that we could do up front before they're in this kind of crisis mode. But I think it's that idea that you have to take these classes. And, my own kiddo was in an AP. What does Mr. Loggins teach? Is that AP World History or
your son was in AP World. He also teaches AP.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He was in AP World History, and literally, like, he didn't really want to take the class, but he said when they were choosing classes, his friends were asking questions and watching him. And he felt obligated to take the class because he didn't want to look like the dumbest one in the group. That was really his reasoning for taking the class. I'm like, are you passionate about history? And he's like, no. I'm like, then why did you take it? And that was the reason. It was like, I didn't want to look stupid because everybody else was taking that class. And I'm like, that is the dumbest reason, but it's a reason for a lot of our kids.
So I just want to pause and really let parents know that we purposely scheduled this topic for today, knowing that the counselors went to all of the students' classes last week and started talking about what classes that you're going to take. So right now is when your child is probably experiencing this and feeling like, well, all my friends are going to sign up for AP World or AP English or AP whatever. And so this is what, as parents, we need to really be aware of it because it's happening right now. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah. I know it's like the worst timing too, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like this topic is so important, but I'm also like so busy right now. So it's like, we have a presentation. I don't know if you can share your screen.
Yes, I can. Let me get it.
That'd be awesome.
Let me make sure I'm showing the right presentation.
With these poor babies, it's a lot. I just don't remember feeling that way in high school. And I know it was, like I'm so old. It was like, it was such a different time, but I just don't remember having those types of, I remember being stressed about turning in assignments, but not even close to what I see with our kids now. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's definitely different.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Peer pressure, the influence of others of a similar age, can lead to positive or negative behaviors. There are good, things like your friends are doing well in school and you want to do well in school. That's good. And we have to remember, like, developmentally with teenagers, they're in this phase of their life where they're just trying to figure out who they are. And a lot of how they do that is by emulating others, looking up to others. And so they're just trying to, again, figure out who they are, what they like. So it's this very vulnerable time when they're not necessarily confident in who they are. And so they're very, very influenced by what's happening around them. I was just talking to somebody the other day and I was like, it feels so good to be 45 years old and actually really not care so much what other people think about me. It's very freeing, because I don't, of course I care and I want people to like me or whatever, but at the end of the day, like, I still sleep very peacefully at night, whether they do or not. And that's something that as a teenager just doesn't happen. So it's like, it's kind of cool that I get to experience that now, but then I have to remember and put myself back into like my teen years of like, did not always feel like that. Like, I definitely wanted the approval of others and all these things. So peer pressure is just, exacerbated by those feelings of wanting to be, valued and appreciated by the people around you. You can go to the next slide, Ginny. Teens learn to say no to drugs and alcohol. They learn to say no to things that we kind of indoctrinate them with as they're growing up, the bad things that they're supposed to do. They're not taught about the dangers of saying yes. And I think that goes for more than just school. Like, how many of you are overcommitted and have a difficult time saying no to things. I can say for myself that I attend things I don't want to attend because I feel guilty. And then I'm kind of crying that I'm so busy, I don't have time for anything. But I have been, somebody who says yes a lot. And it's getting me in positions where I'm burnt out and exhausted and I don't have a lot to give. And so even just saying that out loud right now, that's not necessarily a conversation I have with my kids. Has anybody had that conversation with their kids? Like it's okay to say no and you don't have to be overcommitted. That just for me, it isn't something that I think I've even talked about now that I'm mentioning it.
Yeah, I don't know. Not recently, I haven't. Definitely not recently.
Okay.
But
Yeah. So, um, oops, back one more, sorry.
oh, sorry. Just kidding.
That's okay. So, example, one student sees their classmate signing up for 5 AP classes, which makes them feel like they should too, without even considering their own needs. And I think a lot of time, their basic needs are not considered, even when they're picking classes, when they're in the classes. I'll give you an example. So, I had a student this week who is taking an AP class. I was asking them like, why did you sign up for the class? And then they said like, oh, because I was supposed to. There was an option, which is not an option for everybody, to move back a level. And the student basically told me like, I would rather torment myself and not sleep than have to say that I could not take this class and I can't finish it out because what if my peers wonder where I, and that was the focus. And this is a kiddo who hadn't slept in 3 days, hadn't eaten much. And so her desire to be perceived by her peers as being smart far surpassed her desire to keep herself well and healthy. And so that is like kind of one of those consequences of, saying yes to too many things that you can't handle, like at the expense of your own health, not considering your own needs. Is something that I unfortunately see all the time. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. How influential are peer groups? I think even as an adult, they are. Like honestly, like I definitely worse as a teenager, but how influential are peer groups? Research suggests that peer groups exert extraordinary influence during early adolescence on personal and academic goals. 14-year-olds are more likely to engage in risky behavior than 18-year-olds. One of the reasons I really, really love working in high school is because you get to see that time of transition. When I meet kiddos who are freshmen, sometimes like when they're graduating, I kind of reflect back onto what I remember as freshmen, and it's like a completely different person. Like so much growth and maturity and development happens during that time. It's really cool to get to see. But our kiddos are, highly impacted and influenced by what their friends think. High schoolers are highly responsive to peer behaviors and greatly desire fitting in. And remember this, we're talking about just peer pressure in general. It goes so far beyond just academics. It could be negative behaviors. It could be what we perceive to be as positive behaviors like school. But again, going back to like, how does it influence your health and well-being?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when we focus on like peer pressure with teenagers, we think about getting exposed to drugs and alcohol and like doing like risky behaviors like that, like that's what we typically think about with risky behaviors with teenagers. And so what we're talking about today is really something that I don't think a lot of people think about, because you think about like academic peer pressure. Well, shouldn't that be a good thing? My kid's going to hang around people that take school really seriously. And so they will take school really seriously. And that can be a good thing. That actually can be something really positive. But what we see at Piedmont is sometimes it can go to the extreme where kids are overextending themselves and just doing too much, and they don't have to. And they really struggle with like knowing themselves and being okay with being an individual.
I wish there was a perfect way to gauge that balance. Like it's so like precariously right there. Like it could be good, it could be bad, and it's like, ooh, where do you draw the line, I guess,
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide. Teens are attracted to peer groups with similar aspirational goals shaped and shared by their values. This rings true for a lot. No matter what, if we have kiddos transfer in, kids are so good at finding the people who prioritize the same things, right? Whether that's school or maybe it's not school. And so it is important. I remember my dad used to say this all the time. Like, he would always say, like, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are. Like, he still says that to me to this day. And, you know, it's just like how much who we're around influences our behaviors, influences our thoughts, influences our goals or lack thereof. Example, a student may feel the need to help provide for their family, so they might relate better to peers who understand, can help them get a job, earn money, those kind of things. So I do see this when it comes to academic peer pressure. A lot of the kiddos who feel very pressured to take the AP classes and do really well have friends who feel very similarly. And what I always find really interesting is the friend that I'm talking to always believes that they are the only friend in that group that's actually struggling in school. Like, it blows kiddos' minds when I tell them like how many students I see every year. When I see, like, you know, if I said like, yeah, you know, I get a lot of students who are really struggling in AP world history, and in their mind, in their own lens, they're like, oh my gosh, I literally thought I was the only person struggling. And that's another problem, is I think that's why it's so stigmatized, is because nobody wants to admit that they're having a tough time. Yet if they were able to do that, I think it would provide a space for everybody else to start having these conversations. But it's like, I can't start those conversations until the kiddos are ready to do that. And they just don't. Like, there'll be a class that I won't name classes off because some of them are, I get more clients from than others. But they will literally think like everybody in that class is thriving and it is so easy for everyone. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, like, now I have like 8 other kids that I'm seeing right now whose stressor is coming from exactly the same class. And obviously I cannot tell them that, but they just don't realize that that's what's happening. And so it's unfortunate, because again, if they did know that, I think there would be a lot more room for, you know, scaling things back and acknowledging their health and wellness. But it's like they're so just focused on not being the only one struggling that, you know, I think it just kind of puts them in a bind.
Virginia, your hand's up.
Good morning. I just wanted to share a little story about my senior. One prideful senior male didn't want to ever share. And now we're here in the middle of senior year, realizing, oh, shoot, I'm not going to get through what I need to get through. So we have a good little discussion, and he finally admits and decides, I'm willing to step back and take a course that I would have been kind of like embarrassed to take before, because I realize that now that's kind of my only option. And it's just like, I wish he would have said this sooner, or I wish he would have really shared sooner that he was really struggling and we could have helped early on instead of waiting till the very last minute, because he was just didn't want his friends to see him, in a certain class or taking a certain, class or whatnot. So it's in line with what we're discussing here. I find it really interesting and unfortunate sometimes for these kids.
Yeah.
Just that.
No, that's great. I totally agree. Let me read some comments that are in the chat. Yes, it's okay to say no. And if we give a choice to our child after analyzing, it's actually better of time crunch for them not having clear priorities. For example, saying no to the dishes because they have to study, then playing roadblocks once they're in the room. Well, sure. I mean, they're always going to be teenagers. So I think most parents know their child's limits and how far they can be stretched and challenged without overwhelming. Not to compare as such, but it boggles my mind how one friend is in 10 different activities and taking AP classes, and another, sorry, jumped around, equally intelligent, capable, does not want to do more than just schoolwork. Every child is different. So I think and I absolutely agree that parents do know their child the best, which is why I want you guys to be aware of this and just be aware of that. Like, this right now is something that they will be thinking about, and like they're thinking about their classes for next year, and they may not be talking to you about it because teenagers, they don't always, like Virginia was just saying, they don't always open up until a lot of times it's too late and you're like, why didn't you talk to me about this a long time ago? So like, especially like, they don't actually sign up for classes like really until we come back at the end of January. So Christmas break, when you have those 2 weeks with them and there's no school and it's in between semesters, so they don't have any other work, that's a great time to talk to them about this. And so like, we're Yvonne and I, we kind of like plan this and we're prepping you and giving you those so you can think about what you're going to say. And then when you have those 2 weeks, to really like dig in and talk to them about this, because every child's different. And so you have to talk about, what do they have time for? What can they handle? Like how, and even things like sleep, like, and how much sleep they need. There's recommendations, but every child's different. And so like really thinking about like time management and how they can fit everything in and what's good for them.
Yeah. One of the things I've kind of tried to correct in my dialogue with students is I am very well aware of the fact that they are totally capable of taking the class. Like for the most part, kids, I'm like, yeah, you could totally pull it off. It's not a like, could you? It's a should you. And so, it's this kind of fine balance in the conversations, because sometimes if you suggest that they don't, they kind of infer that you don't think that they can. And that's mostly not true. And they kind of, I've had kiddos get a little bit offended, like, oh, you don't think I could do it, you don't think I can handle it, or they talk to their parents and they're like, my mom doesn't want me to because she thinks I'm dumb, or she doesn't think I can handle it. But it's like, no, I know you can, but I also know what it's going to look like for you, given the fact that you already don't manage your health and your well-being and your sleep and your eating. I just know it's going to make it worse. It's not a matter of if you can. So just be careful when you're having those conversations of like, the way we word it can actually be really important, because we don't want them to feel like we doubt them. I've had these dialogues with my kids. I'm like, why are you taking that class? Like, why are you? And he's like, oh, you don't think I can. I'm like, no, I do. But I've also seen you take one and you just don't really look like you're enjoying life right now, And so just, again, trying to balance like the fact that I care for you. I want you to care about yourself. Do you think you're smart enough to do it? Of course. But sometimes a smart decision is to not, And again, like Miss Davis said, it's like, they're all so different. Their sleep requirements are different. The way they recharge is different. The way they study is different. And, what they can handle and how they organize their time can really impact how well they do in classes, and so it's not a could, it's a should.
Virginia.
I also wanted to mention, I'm not sure if you're going to touch on this, but I noticed that my senior is now drinking coffee, which he didn't before. So, and those are other things that I notice, and I'll see like late night when I wake up in the morning, I'll see the empty coffee containers, and I'm like, what? And it's a bigger coffee, and I'll be like, who's drinking this? And then he'd be like, oh, that was me. And I'm like, well, so that's another thing that I kind of worry about. And for him, just because of his situation, his health wise, coffee is not a good option, but I didn't have that discussion with him because I didn't realize it was being done until, I then started to see the coffee intake, the caffeine intake. And I'm like, oh boy, he's trying to stay up to do his work now and all that stuff. So hopefully, I'm not sure if you'll touch on that, but thank you.
We weren't, but
we were, but I'm just like, oh my, I felt like you had a magnifying glass on me, Virginia, when you were talking about kids and coffee. I'm like,
I know. Well, it made me like, when did I start drinking
bring up
coffee?
The fact that we stop at Starbucks every morning.
Yeah, I like you said that, and I was like, when did I start drinking coffee? And yeah, it was my senior year in high school. So.
Oh my goodness. I mean, literally, we stop at Starbucks every morning, my kids and I don't know if they order hot chocolate. Honestly, I don't know what they order because I just give them my phone and they order it. I'm like, I think my kids might be drinking coffee every morning. That's probably not good. And I didn't really want to acknowledge that, but thanks, Virginia.
And my kid has ADHD, so caffeine is kind of a different effect. So what he's thinking that it's affecting him a certain way, it may not be, but he doesn't know that
Right,
from a
right.
medical standpoint. So it's
Oh,
just,
that's so
something to keep
true.
keep in mind. Like, you think that this is perking you up, but it may not. And yeah, exactly like Rochelle says, caffeine may trigger anxiety and depression. So it's just, being mindful, because these kids are really stressed and kind of willing to do what they think they have to do, just like us adults.
Thank you for pointing that out, Rochelle. I started making coffee here for the staff, and what I noticed is like because it's there and there's a big thing of it, I was drinking like 5 cups of coffee by noon, and I felt like I had to drive myself to the hospital for anxiety. So yes, it is true. Be very careful with caffeine. There's some sort of rule like don't drink it after a certain time if you want to sleep at night. I don't follow it, but I should probably figure out what that is. Not good. Let's see.
Okay, so caffeine can trigger anxiety and depression. Yes. The defensive wall and argumentative line is always up when we have any questions about schools and activities. Know-it-all attitude. Is this typical teenage behavior? Yes. Yes, it is. They completely, like, there is nothing that you could ever say to them. Yes, they know everything. You cannot, and I want to say when they get into college, it gets worse. My daughter right now, we're taking care of my daughter's cat before she comes home for Christmas because it just had to get spayed, and like she's acting like we've never taken care of a pet before, and I'm about to murder her. So yeah, the know-it-all attitude. Know nothing. So yes, that's total normal. And so I guess, when advice I have for like, and I really encourage parents, like, talk to your kids about the classes they're going to take. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, map this out. Like, think about, I'm going to have these 2 weeks. And so when can I do this? The best time is when you are in the car with them. So if you've got errands to run or something that you're going to have to do, like if you're going to take a long car trip to visit some relatives or something like that, that is a great time where they're stuck with you and they can't leave the room. Even short car trips. I was in the car with my son yesterday and he just started like talking to me about random stuff. And I was like, oh my God, he's actually talking. And so then we start talking, so I start asking him questions. Car time is ideal because they can't leave the room. And just like bring it up in casual conversation. Hey, I know that you're going to be signing up for classes next year. What classes are you thinking about taking? And just see what they say. And if you hear like 5 AP classes, like, how come? Like, why are you thinking like that? Let's talk about that. So,
wonder, like when my kid's picking his classes, he's never actually like come to me and been like, hey mom, what do you think about me taking AP classes? Like for all the parents out there that have kids in AP classes, was it a conversation? Like how did that go for you? Because I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I never even had that conversation. He just did it and I just trust him to make his schedule. But I don't know, maybe for other parents, it's like an actual dialogue. I don't know.
yeah.
If anybody has any insight.
So Yvonne, I'm gonna let's actually stop the presentation and let's
Okay.
talk about dealing with stress.
Yeah, we got a lot
So
of good conversation happening up here.
yeah, let's do that.
In Elsa, yeah, 2 p.m. That's the golden rule. Don't drink coffee after 2. Is that what we're saying?
I'm old now, so I don't actually drink it after 8 a.m. So some days I do. When you make it at school, some days I will go and do it. But typically I just have my 2 cups of coffee in the morning and then, but definitely not in the afternoon. I can't do that.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so Sean says, my teen wants to take electronic devices to bed. It's a big tension in the house. I'm recently forbidding it for good. Would love to hear other parents on this topic. I am struggling. Yes, this is a huge struggle in my house. My son and his iPad. My son actually doesn't even like to sleep in his room. His favorite place to sleep is the couch in the family room, where his like video game
Kevin too.
devices. And I like, so like kind of our compromise is on Friday and Saturday night, you can sleep wherever you want. You're cool. But on school nights, you have to sleep in your room. And some nights, and so like because I get up, I'm the first person to get up in my house. I get up very, very early. So I go to bed early. Like if I'm up past 8:30 at night, like I'm a wreck the next day. So I go to bed very early. So it's usually my husband, and God love my husband, but he's not the greatest about taking away the devices. Some nights he does, and I'm just like, you have to take it away, like, because he will just stay on it and like play his games and like look at his YouTube videos all night. So I do actually really think that, you know, having to you know, take that stuff away, I do think that that's, you know, and I think you can do it and like, you know, like, okay, on the weekends or like on vacation times, it's okay. Then you can have it. And then like, maybe like you have like, you know, it's like gradual release of responsibility type thing. Like, okay, I'm going to be really strict. I'm going to take it away, but then I'm going to slowly start trusting you to do this, because ideally they will see the positive impact of like not having it at night and that they're getting more sleep, because it absolutely is keeping them awake. And so then like hopefully they start to see the benefits, and then, you know, you give it to them and then they're up all night again and then they're exhausted in the morning, like, see, no, we can't do that, I'm gonna have to take it away again, and like that type of thing. Yvonne, what do you think?
You sound like you've been in my head the whole time.
Like, the struggle is real. The struggle is real.
It is.
Yeah, it's
when we used to have these conversations about devices, I had it down for a minute. I had my 3 kids. They would all charge their phone in the living room. It was great. You know, I was not their favorite person, but I would make them do it. So now my oldest one's in his 20s, you know, my second one and my little one. Honestly, you guys, I go to bed before they even need to go to bed. I'm not really sure what happens between the hours of 9 and 2 in the morning. So I think I might have just like given up the fight. And you know, my rule is, you know, you have to be in the car at 7:30 in the morning. If you're not, I'm taking your phone for a week. And I've done it once with one of them, and since then they get up. Now, I don't know how much sleep they're getting. They probably go to bed at 3 and get up at 7. I don't know. I should probably do a better job of that. But like I said, I think I just gave up. It was like an exhausting fight. And sometimes when you have to fight every day, I'm just like, if you want to go to school like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to go to bed for myself, and I'm not going to spend until midnight arguing with you guys about your cell phones. So they probably take them to bed. My youngest one now like wants to sleep on the couch all the time because that's in the video game room. And they're in the car at 7:30. That's all I know. That's all I know.
I get that from my senior too. He goes, Mom, don't you remember you used to take away our stuff? We used to have to put it under the door at 9:30. And now my little brothers, they don't have to do that. Like, we used to have to turn everything in. But I do the same thing. I tell them, if you guys cannot wake up on time, everything's being taken away. So do what you got to do.
I know what happened to us. I know years ago, like, I mean, as parents, and like Yvonne have been having these meetings for years, and we've talked about this like for years. And we used to be like so much more on it. And
so can I just say I'm so glad I'm not the only parent, because I feel like I'm the only one, and I'm the mean parent. And yeah, okay. So it is a struggle for everyone. Okay, good.
My 11-year-old walked in my room the other night and he goes, Mom, your phone is still on. I had fallen asleep on my phone.
Yeah, actually, you're probably right. Like, I think I get lectured more about my phone from my children than they get from me, and that's a whole nother thing. But man, this is like a confessional, everybody.
It is. Thank you, though. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh,
the whole point that we do this every Wednesday.
I can't. I just don't have it in me. I'm exhausted by the time I get home. You know, don't even get me started on if I cook dinner.
All right, so Yvonne, let's talk about, because I know parents are feeling it. Elsa said in the comments, you know, her daughter is juggling, like, you know, academics, like stuff like it. This is like you were saying, like this week before finals, this is a crazy week. And like your kids are probably feeling a lot of stress. So how can parents help? Like, what can we do like this week? Okay, it's Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. What can parents do to help?
Yeah. Honestly, I think the lecturing this week is probably not going to be helpful. It's like this is where we start getting into the you know, failure and the gift of failure and letting them kind of reap the consequences of their actions. I get really tempted into like micromanaging my kiddos' school and they don't listen and it ends up being really exhausting. For the most part, everybody, they know what they need to do this week. And they know that if it's piled up, they know why it's piled up and that they weren't getting stuff done earlier in the semester. It's like at this point in the game, it's like I can provide my kiddo, nutritious meals, try to encourage them to get to sleep. We can put our kids in our room. We cannot force them to go to sleep, and we're really trying to get them to be independent young adults. And this is the time where, we have to watch it kind of play out. I don't that's my advice right now is just listening and like, hey, I'm here if you need anything. But as far as like trying to change anything that's happening with them this week, I just don't think it's going to be helpful.
Yeah,
So
I
I don't know if
totally
that's
agree.
helpful.
I think doing the best you can to create a calm environment at home, and just so that there's not additional stress. And I know sometimes that's out of our hands. Stuff happens. The toilet is overflowing. Like stuff happens. So, but the most you can to like create, and like, hey, like I made you breakfast this morning. I'm like this, like make sure like they eat correct and like they eat enough and they're eating healthy, then they're not just eating hot Cheetos, but they're actually have some nutrition, that they are getting as much sleep as possible right now. That is really important, because you're not going to perform well on a test if you are exhausted. So offering to read, they have a big essay to do, offering to read it for them and proofread it. Like doing things like that could be helpful.
I had a student yesterday and she pulls out a big bag of Oreo cookies and I'm like, you cannot eat that for breakfast. She's like, Miss Gunter, I am not crazy. That's lunch. And I was like, oh my gosh. So yes, taking care of themselves, like that's huge, and just encouraging that. Darn it, I had a good one and I can't remember what it is now. Keep talking while I think about it.
I think if they are finding that they are needing to get caught up in classes, which a lot of our students, maybe they I know my daughter was extremely guilty whenever she had a teacher that had a liberal makeup work policy. My daughter would take advantage of that, like you would not believe. And so then at the end of the semester, she'd have all the stuff that she'd have to turn in. And so I always feel like a liberal makeup work policy is a double-edged sword. Yes, it's good and it can be very helpful for some kids, but it also can enable some procrastination, and can be very bad. So helping, if your child is like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do. One thing that always helped with my daughter is I would sit down with her and I would prioritize and I would make a list for her. And I would just go through the grade book and what are the assignments with the most points? Start with those. Those are the most important things to get in. And so helping them, because sometimes they struggle with prioritizing and they just feel like they have so much work to do. So helping them prioritize and like make a list for them to check stuff off, that can be very helpful.
Yeah. I had another thought about just like it kind of starts with a stupid story, but I had so much to do last night, like work related stuff. I was working into the night and I jumped in my car and I went to Target and wandered around aimlessly, which was not really productive or conducive to like getting all my things done. But what I noticed for me is I had to step away for a minute and just take a time out. And when I came back home, I was super refreshed. And so one of the things for my kids that I've noticed is their outlet is not the same as mine. And sometimes my kiddo will play video games for 20 minutes and then start his work. So I have to remember I'm acknowledging it as like, hey, he's just like me where he needs a little break. And, you know, I could go in there and yell and scream at him about all the things he needs to do. But when I think about it from the perspective of like how I handled my stress yesterday or what I need to be okay to get work done, it kind of put into perspective of like, okay, I see what he's doing. He's checking out for a few minutes and he's like regulating himself. And then I've seen him get back into his work and like be super productive. So really trying to be understanding and patient with how he copes with stress, because my instinct is to just turn into a maniac and just start yelling at him. So just acknowledging that, like, what is it for your kiddo that feels good, even if it's just for a few minutes, to get to a space where you feel calm enough to work. Because when your mind is racing, you're not putting out your best work, you're not retaining a lot of information. So how can you maybe have that conversation with your kiddos like, hey, I understand that there's going to be times where you need a minute. What does that look like for you, so that I'm not like harping on you for that? And what's a good time frame that we can expect that to be in, so that I know you're not just lagging, but you're actually trying to like bring yourself back down from your stressful day. So just a suggestion. Everybody, again, handles things a little bit differently.
Yeah. So let's talk about, okay, so you guys are going to talk to your kids over the break about the classes they're going to take, and you find out that your kid is going to take 5 AP classes. What should you do? So what I think is, talk to them about which specific classes. Talk to them, do they like that subject area? If they are signing up to take AP chemistry, but they hate science and they don't actually want to go into any sort of scientific field, maybe they don't need to take that class. And so, you know, talk to them about, again, think of with an AP class, it's very, very important that, because they're going to be spending a lot of time with that subject. And so it's really important that it's a subject that they actually like, because if they are taking AP US history, but they really don't like history, then that's not something that they're going to enjoy. And they're going to be spending a lot of time on something that they don't enjoy. And that's not necessarily the best choice for them. So that's what I would talk about. I would, and then talk about and do the math with time management. I think I said this last week when we were talking about AP classes and signing up for classes. Estimate, this is a rough estimate, this is not like the Bible and like absolutely going to be true about, like amount of homework, but in general, each AP class, consider it to be an hour of homework a night, like homework, like, and studying time, like all together. Like some classes don't actually have actual homework that they have to do, but it's implied that you are reading, you are studying, like there's like work that you're doing for that class. So figure an hour for each AP class. And then if they're taking other classes, generally like a regular class, we would say 20 to 30 minutes of homework a night. And so some classes aren't going to have any, like a PE class isn't going to have any. But like, that's like a rough guide to think about. And then just do the math. Like how much homework does that equal out to each night? Are they
I'm like, oh my God, hours for some kids.
I know it's a lot. And so are they in clubs? Do they have after school commitments? Are they doing sports? Do they have a job? Like really, like sometimes for a kid to like actually like they need somebody to sit down with them with a like day planner and like plan out the hours of the day and how are you spending, like, and keeping in, okay, these are the hours that you're actually in school and class. These are the hours that if you have a job that you have to work. These are the hours that you're going to spend on clubs. These are the hours you're going to spend on your sports. This is when you're going to do your homework. And oh, don't forget that you have to sleep. You do have to actually see your family and see your friends and have like the fun stuff in life. So sometimes kids like need that where they like actually like map it out and do time management. And I think like just doing, you can go on Google and like a weekly planner type thing with like hours of the day and like map it out with them. And then that oftentimes is very, very helpful to like, oh, this is too much. This is too much of a burden. I'm not going to be able to do this. And so I think that really doing that now, because it's a real struggle when we get into next year and like the class has already started, and then we find out like, oh, this is too much to handle. Like we as a school will try to work with you and your child and figure out a solution. But the problem is, and like Ms. Pereira was talking about this last week, we build the master schedule based on what the students request. And so the classes fill up. And a lot of times what we run into is like kids like, no, I can't handle this. I need a schedule change. But then there's not any classes available because all the classes are full and they're really stuck. And that's like, we hate that. Like we don't enjoy that as a school. Like that's not what we want. So that's why we really want to try to avoid that. And
no matter what we do or what we say or what we try, it happens every year. I'm sitting with a student and I'm talking to Ms. Perm, like there's nothing we can do. Like,
yeah, it's really horrible. We really, sure. we hate that. And so, but I also want to like briefly talk about, and we're getting close to being done, but I also briefly want to talk about kind of the opposite end. And if you find that your kids aren't pushing themselves, like they should push themselves a little. Like we've been talking so much about like pushing themselves so much and like so far, but there's the other side too, and pushing just a little. I had a conversation yesterday when my son and I were in the car, and I told you like we were having this really great conversation, and I took advantage of that. And I was like, hey, have you started thinking about your classes for next year? And things that you want in that, because he's a freshman. He's not taking a world language this year. We purposely didn't because my son struggled in middle school, and I was like, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle that. But he's doing a lot better in high school than we thought he would. He's actually doing, he's handling it really well. And so I'm like, I think we should try, world language next year. Like, do you want to take Spanish? Would you like to take French? Like what? And he's like, in his typical teenage boy, I don't know. But I like to, plant the seeds, right? That's an expression that I say a lot. And so like getting them to start thinking about that. And so maybe like you're doing some encouragement, in the other way. If they didn't sign up for any AP classes and they've got mostly A's and B's as their grades, maybe they try one. Like I don't want to discourage AP. I think students a lot of times fall in the trap and they take too many of them, and that's not necessary. And so I don't want to come across that I don't like AP classes. In some ways I don't. I do think the College Board is a little bit of a scam, not going to lie. But I think the benefit of taking one or two AP classes when they're in high school is it does prepare them for what a college level class is like. And so I think taking one in their junior year, taking one in their senior year is totally reasonable for the vast majority of our students. And I think that might be a good idea. So, okay. In the chat, we recently visited our pediatrician and my daughter listed her classes and her after school activities. The doctor said she's basically managing 2 full-time jobs. Most adults come home and take a break from work, and the kids come home and do their second job. That's Elsa. Thank you. That is absolutely true. A couple of years ago, I guess it was about 5 years ago now, I had the teachers, we did these like shadow days where the teachers went to classes with students. Yvonne, did you ever do that? When we did the shadow days?
Oh, yes, I did.
So we had where we would pair teachers up with a student and they would go to all those students' classes. And the teachers were like, oh my God, I am exhausted. Like so much information was given to me today. And I can't imagine these kids go home and they do 4 hours of homework. Like that is.
I had AP lit after lunch and I literally could not keep my eyes open. I was dying. And I'm like, they do this every day. It was 10 times more exhausting than my work.
Yeah.
That was like 5 years ago. We should do that again. That was fun.
We should. So yeah, so just like, and teenagers, because again, they know everything, as we've established. Like that's why like I love like planting the seeds, like I say, because they're not going to believe you the first time. But you plant those seeds and then you drop another little seed later on in conversation, and just like randomly conversation, like, oh, I heard so and so like they're totally stressed out in school because they took all these classes that, you know, like, and they just like didn't choose wisely. And just little like drops in conversation, and then all of a sudden they're going to come up with the idea, and they're going to act like it was their idea all along and that they just thought of it on their own. And you'll in your head be like, I've been talking to you about that for 2 months. Okay. Because that's what it's like being a parent. So
Yes. I don't even do the lectures anymore. I said something like about college, and my son, all he says is, I know how college works. And I was like, okay, knock yourself out then.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Parents, hopefully this was helpful. And I think definitely it was some group therapy for all of us this morning, and maybe we all needed that. So thank you. I appreciate that. Sean, I'm glad when I'm struggling with my son and his device, I will think about you and your own struggles, and I'll be like, I'm not alone. Thank you.
Yes, vice versa.
You're
Okay,
all doing great. We're doing the best we can.
And so this actually is a little foreshadowing in our topic for next week. Next week, we're going to talk about radical acceptance, which is that whole idea of accepting this is where we are. And this is what, and it's one of my favorite topics. So I hope you join next week, because I think that you will find that topic to be very, very valuable. So have a great week. Good luck with your stressed out teenagers this week. We'll get through this. It's going to be okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too.